Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing is an authorized brother dealer and repairs all brands of machines. Mid-South Sewing, known for their many fabrics, classes, and individual instructions. Classes on sewing and embroidery machines, software, sergers, and quilting. Mid-South Sewing, Knoxville and Murfreesboro.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. Next to New Knox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, we take a closer look at artists and their creations, from paintings and puppets to sculptures and fun interactive structures called twigloos.
And really kind of like what I enjoyed doing as a kid was building forts. Kind of laid the pathway to what I like to do now. I'm just a big kid still building forts, kind of.
Artist Andrew Saftel says an unexpected move to Tennessee 30 years ago and his continued love for the volunteer state inspire his work every day.
And so everything about Tennessee is in the work. I can't speak specifically to exactly what that is or where that would be in the work. I just think it's everywhere.
A couple of friends hope to bring community and the arts together by showing people how to make giant handmade puppets.
You know, and when we started doing the big puppets, I think we would get all sorts of reactions to them. So some people would see them and just like the sheer size of them is just sort of awe-inducing.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this artistic edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. Some artists aren't just influenced by nature, they incorporate it. Meet Kelly Brown, who never outgrew his childhood love for sticks and making forts.
What I enjoyed doing as a kid was building forts. Kind of laid the pathway to what I like to do now. I'm just a big kid still building forts, kind of. I love natural materials and I love the shapes of sticks. I'm really fond of what I can do with them. I can manipulate them and bend them to certain degrees. And then it's extended on and working with a variety of other materials as well, where I'm using metal in that same fashion. My name is Kelly Brown. I run a creative manufacturing venue called Bowerbird Sculpture. We work with a variety of different materials, from sticks to steel to wood, everything we can get our hands on, bicycle parts included. I came up here to graduate school to University of Tennessee to get my master's degree and really kind of fell in love with the great outside around here. I mean, East Tennessee is beautiful and has so much to offer. I really loved going up into the mountains, into the Smokies, and then I really fell in love with rock climbing, putting up new rock climbing routes, and I just really enjoyed doing that. I love that sense of adventure, and it's kind of been a big part of my life. Yeah, I was gonna come down. Well, I've always drawn pictures. I've always been able to draw. I had the ability to render. Up and into there. I've always sort of wanted to be an artist. It was either going to be an artist or an architect, and I think of some of the things that I build now that do have some sort of architectural elements as well. But a lot of, like I said before, came from that extension of building forts as a kid, because you know, I could hear my mom ringing the dinner bell and it's like, come to dinner, but I didn't even want to leave because I was so enthralled in my activity at the time, where I was so focused on creating something and wanting to get the fort done, and you know, I'd lose track of time, and it was a real kind of catalyst behind, you know, the way I look at art making now. All right. Well, I've done some pieces for Iams Nature Center. For one, Joe's Grove, which was a children's play area that is right there near the visitor center at Iams. Some of the ones that I get into that for kids I call twigloos. They look like igloos, but they're made out of sticks or twigs. Pieces are supposed to be interactive. You know, it's not something just to look at, but you go inside, you touch the sticks. The sticks have a certain sense of smell. So it's like a lot of the different senses are aroused through these, you know, interactions with them. I had the opportunity of creating some bigger twig loop type pieces for Navitat, which was a canopy traverse company that's right there at IAMS as well. We did what they call the nest, which is about 40 feet in the air and built in pieces, and it was kind of an engineering feat in a lot of ways to get the thing up a platform that high in the air. And we also did the entry platform, which is they call the tree house. I've created some things out of bicycle parts, and the bicycles, I'll cut them up into pieces and then use them as lines. I'm using more metal pieces now, and I like to retain the color of the bikes that they originally had and different kinds of shapes and things where I'm kind of like in a lot of ways painting with the bicycle pieces. Well, I had an opportunity of creating a piece for Legacy Parks or Outdoor Knoxville when I built an arch out of bicycles. You know, I did like a call out on social media to try to get bikes so we could get enough of them, and then, you know, drew up a design and pitched the idea, and then we started building the shape of the thing, and then working with Legacy Parks and the city of Knoxville to try to get a piece that would be a nice little reflection of our outdoor community, and basically the bike community had embraced it. And I had another opportunity to build a piece. I call him Rad Man, and he sits out in front of Alliance Brewery. He's made out of bicycle parts, and I try to kind of capture the character of a lot of the mountain bikers around here. You see them with their big flowing beard riding down the hills and stuff, so I tried to emulate that character. We did a pig for Archer's Barbecue, and then it really didn't fit into the scheme of things that they wanted, so the Preservation Pub bought it. So the story goes like this. The pig didn't want to get barbecued, so he took a walk around Market Square, and he went up there to the Magic Beer Fountain, had a little taste, and just decided that he's going to grow some wings, and he became the protector of the still. So that's the story behind the pig at the Preservation Pub. So if you go up there, you can rub his nose, and that means you'll come back to the pub again someday. Alright, this is kind of my stuff I've been storing for the digger. I have been collecting digging pieces, anything that has something to do with digging. I've got shovel blades and pickaxes. I've got 4 plows now from the 1800s or not early turn of the century for this vision I have. It's the digger. He's like my Rodin thinker. He's like, when I get in a very contemplated state, I put a shovel in my hand and I dig. And I've made smaller mock models of him around too, but like I visualize this thing and I want to make him. I want to create the digger. Most people consider what I did stick art. I heard it called a variety of different things too. I've even called it recycled art. Some people have even said something, say for instance, it's environmental art because I've used natural materials or recycled materials in ways that fit the project. I'm not one for labels. I consider myself an artist. I work with a variety of different materials, and I love creating things that I find interesting, that I feel like other people would find interesting as well.
Later on Tennessee Life, giant puppets parade down the streets of Knoxville as a part of a renewed interest in an old art form. But next, artist Andrew Saftel shares his unique path to Tennessee and how it helped launch his career.
Andrew Saftel never thought he would end up in the South, but after 30 years of creating and showcasing artwork in Tennessee, he can't imagine calling any place else home.
The influence of Tennessee in my work is all pervading. You know, I'm a professional observer of life and my surroundings. That's what I do 24 hours a day. I'm always looking for images and ideas and feelings and objects, and always trying to gather things in my thoughts and write things down for my work. You can never slow down. And so everything about Tennessee is in the work. I can't speak specifically. I just think it's everywhere. And it's really for the viewer to answer instead of me. I approach the work as a process. I put something down, and it's all a response in the moment to what's happening. And then afterwards, usually I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, that's an element that came from down the road from me, or there's an object I bought up at the Jimmy's Junk and stuff down the road. And so it's more of those kind of things than an image that would be about Tennessee. I grew up in Rhode Island on Narragansett Bay, and it was the greatest place to grow up. We were wild, we were loose, we could go wherever we wanted. My parents did not know where we were all day long. We were in the water, in the woods. And I went to a Episcopal high school. They had a little art room, and that was kind of my first art studio. And the teacher took a liking to me and gave me a job to be monitor of the art room. So I got a key. And so I could go anytime I wanted, and that ended up being my first identity as an artist. My first love of art was drawing. When I was a little kid, I loved to draw. I would go in the corner with my little sketchbook, and I'd have my little pencils, and I would mostly copy pictures, comic books, Flintstones. And my father would take us to the library. It was a big deal, you know, we're going to the library. And the first time we went, he told me, my brothers and sisters went off into the aisles to get books, and he said, you were nervous, and you clutched onto my pants, and you said, Daddy, pictures, not words. But I left and went to California the day after high school, because my brother was out there working in the carnival. And so I landed in San Francisco, and he picked me up in the truck with a bunch of carnies and dogs, and we went to Sacramento, and I woke up in the morning and went on the carnival lot and did that for a couple summers. Moved to a few different places, Bozeman, Montana, and then back to San Francisco. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and she got a job in Knoxville teaching at UT in the art department. And so we moved here. The best thing I ever did. You know, I think it's interesting to be back in the Knoxville Museum of Art. This museum played a big role in my life. There's all this incredible artwork around here, and the curators and the director and the staff here, they've been fantastic all these years. Stephen Wicks, when I first moved to town, the curator, I was working for the museum, going out into the schools as an artist in the schools, the program. And Stephen had just come, we're about the same age, so we kind of grew up together around the museum. And he would come to my studio, and he finally said, I think you need to have a show, a solo show. And we worked on it for a year or so, and they did a catalog, and that kind of catapulted me. I'd start sending that catalog around, and it gave me a confidence, I think, more than anything. Like, maybe I can do this, and maybe I do belong here in this museum with all this other great art. This show at KMA downstairs that I had in '94, it was called Confluence, and that was the name of a huge painting, a 6-by-8 foot painting about the rivers coming together and the confluence of the rivers here in Knoxville, and confluence of events in life. And I made 2 rivers. I drew them on the floor out of copper wire, and they came together like a confluence into one. And then on that floor in that river, I placed found objects, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things all tied together. The early work that I did in California and Montana, and then the early work in Tennessee, was completely abstract. And then one day I was just not satisfied. I didn't like the language. I wanted to start telling stories. Whether it's just one spoon in there, and I found that spoon on the road, and there was a raccoon dead across, whatever the story is, I want to have something that I can talk about and share that is more than just the language of art and abstraction. That writing came from a little boy in Nashville in 1914. I remember when I had my studio here in Knoxville, if I got a bunch of work done, then I'd go out looking for things. Either I'd go to the junkyard, or sometimes I'd just go to the library, the Hodges Library, public library downtown, and I would just get off on some floor and just start walking through the stacks and pull out picture books and anything, just As I said earlier, 24 hours a day, always looking for things for your work. Oh, it makes me so proud to see my work up in the region. The fact that the Knoxville Museum of Art has my piece up in their current show, it means a tremendous amount to me. I think that I have grown up with this town, and this town has grown up in such a beautiful way. I love where Knoxville is now and the type of development that's happened here. It's just turned into such a beautiful place to live. This is a really good time for me. I had many galleries around the country, and I was constantly, you have 14 weeks and you got to have 9 paintings, and you always have this going. Right now, I'm not doing that. I'm doing more projects on my own. The most important of which right now is for the East Tennessee Children's Hospital. They commissioned a gigantic tapestry, which we hung, a 20-foot tapestry. They bought a large painting of mine that I had in the studio, and then they've commissioned me to do a 24-foot by about 3-foot painting that I just finished. So there's a lot of opportunities there to do more art. My wife and I live in the Sequatchie Valley, which is an hour and a half west of here, going towards Nashville. And it is spectacular. Beautiful valley with a river running through it. We've lived there for 22 or 3 years now. We have 32 acres on a river, 2 big gardens. It's a dream life. And I don't know how it happened. But every day I wake up, I go out on my deck, I look at everything, and I go into the studio. I've received so much back from the world in response. Emotional. People hug me, and when they see the work, and they're crying, and it means so much to people. I've seen it. I see it in the eyes. Like when I was younger at openings, they come up and they would just want to know. And then I go back to my studio and I remember that it works. People get it, and they want it, and they need it.
Now for a grown-up side of puppets. With a background in art and drama, a couple of friends wanted to bring handmade creations to the streets of Knoxville. So the Catty-Wampus Puppet Council was born. We were there for a workshop and the group's first parade.
The main goal or the mission of the Catty-Wampus Puppet Council at this point in time is to cultivate community and promote play through the puppetry arts through puppets. And those two missions, that kind of simultaneously, this desire to strengthen the community in Knoxville as well as play, go hand in hand. And those were missions, I think, for us that came about really early on in what we were doing. I'm Rachel Milford, and I'm a co-founder of the Catty-Wampus Puppet Council. We started making together in the summer of 2014, not necessarily knowing that we were going to grow into an arts organization yet, but that's really when we started. Spring of 2015 was when we kind of put our first show together. We get asked a lot about the name. We made a couple puppet heads and started taking them out on the street. The grandma and grandpa were our first. We just took them out busking and having fun and that sort of thing. And then when we were asked to start doing shows, we were like, well, we need a name. Who are we? So for us, that conversation really boiled down to this idea that we wanted to be rooted in this community. And the word catty-wampus really appealed to us, first of all, because it is a Southern colloquialism, but also because this idea of something being catty-wampus. So catty-wampus means, a little off kilter, a little awry, not quite perfect. My background was in theater. I grew up in Knoxville and was really active in theater when I was in middle and high school and into college. And in college, I got more into visual art and started doing painting and sculpting and printmaking and things. And it was after college I moved to Olympia, Washington, to do an AmeriCorps position there. And there's a pretty rich puppetry community there. They also do a really awesome, gigantic puppet parade, kind of in a similar vein to what we're hoping to do this spring, called the Procession of the Species. It's a big community-based art project. And I think getting to be in that parade, as well as meeting other puppeteers in Olympia, all of a sudden I found myself kind of fascinated by this process that for me was a way to bring together like that love for the performing arts, as well as that love of making and the visual arts. And the big puppet puppets in particular, I felt really attracted to because of this extra element of collaboration that was involved in them. Making a big puppet is not really something you want to do by yourself. It takes way too much time. You would get very frustrated, 10 hours into the paper mache process. And so it kind of lends itself to the collaborative art of making and to community building through that. The origin of these style giant puppets and parade puppets is really rooted, at least in the US, in a gentleman named Peter Schumann. Peter Schumann founded a group called Bread and Puppet in the early 60s in New York. There were other groups that were doing this style of art at the same time in Europe and other countries. Certainly big parade style puppets there's a lineage that goes back further than that as well, but the sort of resurgence of making in this way was really catalyzed by Peter Schumann, and Bread and Puppet was using this style of art as something they could take to the streets, that they could use for pop-up street performances and for protests, a lot of social justice activism work, because it was big, right? It drew attention to it. The word puppet, puppet is used in so many different forms. It's even a metaphor that we use often to kind of describe people that can have negative connotations sometimes. A puppet is really just an inanimate object that we bring to life. And so, we go back to the Punch and Judy style days, marionettes, there's sock puppets, hand puppets, all of that. And the big puppets, kind of these giant parade puppets, are their own sort of genre within that too. My generation grew up on puppets. We grew up on Jim Henson and the Muppets, the Labyrinth, and Pee-wee's Playhouse. We didn't have as much animated and certainly like Pixar TV. So as a lot of this, there's a lot of nostalgia around that. And when we started doing the big puppets, I think we would get all sorts of reactions to them. So some people would see them and just like the sheer size of them is just sort of awe-inducing and playful and exciting. And then some people think they're kind of creepy. They look very static here sitting behind me, but when people are bringing them to life, whether you're wearing a helmet and embodying that with your movement, or you have like our big Dolly Parton that people have seen around town, and she's moving and her arms are moving around. It's a little creepy. It's a little strange to see an art object brought to life, but it's also simultaneously very magical, right? And very whimsical. We're offering a bunch of free workshops for people to come and learn some of the skills and techniques that we use and get inspired to make their own big creations, masks and costumes and things for the parade. We're also working with a lot of local community groups and helping them build things. One of the things I love about this medium is you don't have to go down to the art store and buy $300 in oil paints. You don't have to buy a bunch of canvas. You can honestly go to your recycling bin and probably the dump and get about everything that you're going to need to make. So this idea of cheap art, that art can be accessible, that we can reuse and recycle with it, that I can make things out of cardboard and bamboo and old house paint that I get at the dump, or free foam, things like that. A lot of what we do is based in paper mache, and when you're doing that style of paper mache, you need some sort of armature, just like when you did paper mache when you were a kid and your teacher got out balloons and you put newspaper on that. We use buckets and helmets and all sorts of things to make armatures, and then the paper mache, the style that you see behind me, is usually done with clay. So we'll take clay and we'll lay that on the armature and we'll sculpt out the face, the ears, if it's an animal, the teeth and everything. And the clay's lovely because you get this sort of detail work. And then we'll take that and we'll put a plastic trash bag over the clay, and we'll use paper bags for paper mache. So we're always asking friends and family to save Trader Joe's bags, Whole Foods bags, Kroger bags for us, and we'll use those for paper mache. We'll use like a cornstarch water goop. We try to go to the dump a lot. We go to the hazardous waste dump site that the city has, and we'll get old house paint that people aren't using and use that, as well as acrylics too. And when it comes to making sort of the bodies of a lot of our puppets, we really rely on a lot of, what people throw away too. So we may use old chicken wire. We'll take bed sheets, old bed sheets, and dye those to make costumes and things like that. Using things like bamboo or broken broom handles to make, the arms that hold up, the stick that holds up a hand for a puppet and moves it. So it's all about, for us, as much like reusing as we can, as little purchasing as well. So I tell people, like our big Dolly Parton puppet that's 12, 13 feet tall, my estimate is she probably cost about $50 to build. Paper bags to tear. You know, we just started doing this as a bit of a hobby, and it just sort of started moving itself forward. It has its own life force, and we've been kind of running, you know, behind to catch up, and so it's continuing to sort of unfold and transform, you know, but what I see it growing into, we became a nonprofit. And as a nonprofit, you know, we see ourselves growing, continuing to grow into the community, to be doing more shows, continuing to make this parade hopefully an annual tradition. The idea is, how can we all be working together? How can we be bringing the performing arts to the forefront too in this community? Puppets can do all that. They're a start. They're a start, yeah. And that's why we want more people in the conversation, bring their skills and their talents and gifts.
We hope you've enjoyed the talent and creations from these Tennessee artists. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing is an authorized brother dealer and repairs all brands of machines. Mid-South Sewing, known for their many fabrics, classes, and individual instructions. Classes on sewing and embroidery machines, software, sergers, and quilting. Mid-South Sewing, Knoxville and Murfreesboro.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. Next to New Knox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. A DVD of this program is available by visiting easttennesseepbs.org.